Hey, welcome to another episode of Rocket Revenue Podcast. My name's Troy Barter. Our co-host Gabe Pankinen isn't in today, so doing a solo episode. What we're going to talk about is stretching ICP, doing what I would call outside prospecting. Long story short, some of the best sales development representatives and best salespeople and best prospectors that I've ever worked with leveraged what I would call outside prospecting. In other words, they weren't just looking to call on the leads that fit right within their ICP that were already in their CRM. So, what do I mean by both of those two abbreviations? So, ICP means ideal customer profile. So a lot of times when you see advice online about ICP, it's not about expanding it. It's not about finding new things that fit in your ICP. It's usually about narrowing down on your ICP and really like niching down on everything and going specifically after the most narrow target possible. And I found that doing the opposite can actually really help you, because what will happen is you will find lanes that no one else is in. You'll find wide open territory that is often a lot hotter territory and a lot hotter leads than what you've been working in that standard ICP that is just the stuff that's sitting in your CRM. By CRM, I just mean Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever you use to log your deals. That's what's in the CRM. That's usually where people work. But when it comes to outside prospecting, what that means is you're going outside of the leads that are already in your CRM and you're looking for leads that aren't in the CRM yet, but were people that might be a great fit to be a customer for whatever it is that you're offering. Why is this helpful? Well, this really isn't related to Rocket, but when I started salesorg.io, some of the largest deals that we did, in fact, almost all of the largest deals that we did, were customers that would ask for a solution or a particular product that we didn't offer. Like they would ask for a particular type of recruiting contract that we didn't even know existed. In fact, when they asked, we had to go look up what it was. And then we're like, oh yeah, where you pay us thousands of dollars a month for us to hit a certain target and give you a certain amount of recruits. Yeah, we do that. And then we had to kind of make it up as we went. So when it comes to finding or expanding your ICP, it's kind of the same concept, where as with SalesOrg, I really didn't know what the best product was for us to offer. The market kind of dictated it. And it's the exact same concept when it comes to outside prospecting. What you're looking for is the potential for there to be ICP that your company hasn't already figured out really is your ICP. And what you'll find is, particularly at a startup, you can sometimes find lanes and industries and verticals that you can work that nobody would have ever thought to do. And it turns out they're actually better. They're a better fit. They're hotter leads. You're actually getting the deals in a lot faster for larger deal sizes. This stuff happens. So I'll give you an example of how we did this in the past, and then I'll go over how to do it. So in the past, we did this at PandaDoc, where the ICP there, when it came to PandaDoc, they really wanted to sell customers that were exactly like them. You know, they had a tech sales team that was looking for digital signature, which is what PandaDoc offered. Their, competitor to DocuSign, large company now, worth over $1 billion. But what we found, particularly as soon as the pandemic hit, is that, hey, yeah, we can keep going after these sales teams. BK said, hey, why don't we just look at what DocuSign has on their website for all of the different industries that they serve? It was like, all right, cool, great. So what that means is that if that was going to be our complete strategy in terms of what we were going after, so PandaDoc, which was a smaller company, they're still much smaller than DocuSign now, our goal is to only go after customers that are the exact ones that DocuSign has identified that they want to go after too. So that means that on every deal, we're going against the behemoth that's out there that isn't the easiest to outsell. We did it often, but it isn't the easiest. But like, why would you just go after the exact same deals that the large company, the huge one, has already won? Why wouldn't you try to find stuff that maybe they haven't thought to look for? And that's exactly what happened when the pandemic occurred. A lot of customers needed digital signature that weren't using digital signature in the past. So an example would be education. Colleges, high schools, private schools, grammar schools, where they were signing everything just on paper. They'd print it out at the office and they'd have the parents sign it, or they'd have the educator sign it. But now you can't do that because of the pandemic. This is 2020, 2021. So instead, they needed to find some solution to be able to use digital signature. Now they went from being someone that would be a late adopter to an early adopter. And they also all had funding. Government nonprofit was also the same way for us. So they had great funding. And when it came to government, usually it's really difficult. There's a lot of red tape. It's hard to get a deal done, but now they need the deal to get done fast. And they have the funding for it and they're ready to go. And no one else wanted to go after those deals because they knew historically they were really difficult to get and it took forever to get them to sign. So these are things that DocuSign probably wasn't leaping over a desk to get to. And how did we find out that these exist, number one, and that number two, it might make sense for us to prospect into them? Well, what we would do back at Panadoc, and I say we, but really, I mean, this was Luke Ruffing, Jed Marley, the reps that worked on my team over at Panadoc that are now huge successes, both on social media and both at any place that they care to work at. But what they would do is they would look at the inbound leads because, in terms of the deals that were already closing at Panadoc, because the deals that close are a fortune teller for what could close in the future, right? And what they were looking for was, number one, customers that were not in the typical industry that we were prospecting into, or at the very least, not in the same region that we would typically prospect into. You know, so for example, if everything that we're going after is sales teams, and then you say, hey, what the hell, college just signed up. I wonder why that is. Maybe we should look into that deal because it's a decent sized deal. So that was the first one. It's outside of what the typical stuff is that we're going after. All right, well, let's look deeper. The next thing that they would be looking for is, was there a great product market fit? In other words, this was like a round peg in a round hole. They didn't need us to do any additional custom work. It wasn't difficult. We didn't have to bring in a sales engineer even. What our solution was and what they needed was a perfect fit. And then the next one was, how excited were they when they bought? Were they like absolutely pumped about it, borderline being willing to give up referrals? When we signed them up, it was a really easy process and they were very excited. And what they found is that if you found a customer that was not in an industry that we typically were going after, and there was a great fit in terms of the product and in terms of their needs, there wasn't any kind of big things we needed to kind of run through or hoops to go through or any additional custom work, and they were really excited about signing up with us, that was the leading indicators that we probably need to take a look and see if other similar customers or prospects out there, other colleges, other high schools, other government nonprofits that were out there might be as interested as they were. You know, they might have came in inbound. Now we're going to look outbound, you know, and then we also have extra information. You know, there was, I believe it was called the CARES Act, where they had this additional funding to be able to buy digital signature that they didn't have before, and they had urgency. So it's like, all right, we probably need to look into this fairly quickly. And that's exactly what they did. So what we did was we built a list. There's a bunch of different ways that you can build a list. I'll tell you, my favorite way is to build it through seamless.ai. You can get 50 free credits. Just go to salesorg.io. You can get 50 free lead credits on Seamless, and you also get enrollment in our course for free. That's not why I was doing this topic, by the way, but just to say there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it, but that way you can do 50 for free. And you build a list. So if it's high schools, all right, cool. We're looking for high schools. Probably want to keep it within the same region of the one that signed up. And then you go after it and you start calling. What I would recommend is you want to dip a toe in the water. Just because one sold that is outside of the typical industry that you work and that is a great product market fit and they were really excited doesn't mean that everyone else is going to be. So you're not going to take all of your eggs and put it into the basket of high schools now because one signed up, or colleges because one signed up. But you're going to dip your toe in the water. So maybe you make a list of 50 or a list of 100, and you don't do all of your cold prospecting into that list, but you do some of it. And you see whether or not you're getting the same results and the same reception from them when you call into them. And if you do, and then it's all right, cool, we're booking some meetings here. Don't put all of your eggs into that basket yet. Let's see how those meetings go. But if they start to close and they start to close consistently and the deal sizes are good and the deal velocity is good in terms of where we started at the deal, what day we started to when it closed, the sales cycle is quick, right? And there's all these reasons, and the closing percentage is high. You say, all right, well, all of this is leading me to believe that we probably need to do more than just dip our toe in the water. And once I'm convinced that this is a lane that is hot, no one's going after it, they're interested, they're excited, we get a good deal size on this, the closing percentage is high, I put all of my eggs in the basket. It's not even some. Once I'm positive of that and I realize that we have found a hot lane, we have found a hot industry that wants our product that other competitors aren't going after because we found it before they did, Well, then I'm going to put everything that I have into making hay while the sun is shining. I don't want to wait on that. I want to put everything that I have into getting as many of them as I can as possible, because eventually what was hot today might be cold tomorrow. So I need to get after them quickly. And obviously, with that particular example, they had a grant from the government where they could move quickly on this stuff. And they were probably going to start looking into not just PandaDoc, but DocuSign and other things that were out there. So because of factors that were out there in the market, it led to them being much hotter than what they normally would have been, and also to close much faster than they normally would have been, which means we need to move quick on that. And because of that, we put everything that we had into it. Funny enough, I actually didn't put everything I had into it because I was the manager. Jed and Luke found that. So had I told my VP of sales that we found this lane, what the VP of sales would have said at the time was, well, then we need to get everybody on it. But I didn't want to do that. And you might say that was cutting off my nose to spite my face, but Luke and Jed found it. Luke and Jed did all of this extra work that I, as the manager, didn't ask them to do, so I protected them. I gave them the entire territory because that territory didn't exist before they found it. And as a manager, I believe that when you do those type of things, when you practice ingenuity out there, you get creative and you put in extra work, you should be rewarded for it. So that doesn't mean that you should do the things that a typical sociopath sales leader would do, which is, oh, thank you for finding that. Now let me give it away to everybody else. No, I'd rather get less deals in, but reward the motion and reward the habit and reward what they did, because then, number one, those great A players want to keep working for me. They're excited to work for me. They know that I care about them legitimately. By the way, I still work with both of these guys. This is a half a decade ago at this point, and I still work with Jed very closely, and I still work with Luke very closely, and there's probably part of the reason for that is that I didn't say, oh, well, we're just going to take all of the work that you did and give it away. And you found this great pie. Now here's a slice that you get to keep. No, I wanted them to have the entire pie because I feel like that's how it should be. You should reward that kind of behavior. And it paid off because that was a large reason why at PandaDoc, I've talked about this in the past, when I took over outbound for PandaDoc, we had to 10x the number. We had to literally 10x what they had done the year before in outbound revenue to the new year. And we did. And the reason why we did it is because of this motion that I'm laying out to you in terms of expanding your ICP. So long story short, you may have a pretty good idea of what your ICP is, but even here at Rocket, we've thought that we've known what the ICP is, and it changes when a deal comes in that's a really good deal that fell outside of the typical industry that we prospect into. So anytime that happens, when a deal comes in or when an inbound comes in and it's something that's different than what you're used to, pay close attention to it. Pay close attention to how excited they are when they buy. Pay attention to how great of a fit your offering is to what their needs were. And also pay attention to, all right, is this what we would typically sell, or are they in a different industry or in a different region? What I mean by different region, I know that we're wrapping up, but just so to clarify, what I mean by different region is, let's say that we were crushing it on those educational deals, the colleges and the high schools on the East Coast. All right, cool. And that's all that we're going after. All right, well, I might have another rep that's like, hey, they're only going after it on the East Coast. Can I do the West Coast? Well, if they're not going after it and you'd like to find an underserved region for an industry that's hot for us, absolutely. And they were fine with it too. All right, cool. If that's the case and they're never going to go after the ones on the West Coast because there's so much to do on the East Coast, go for it. So it's not just industry that's underserved. Sometimes you're crushing it in an industry, but you're in a particular region where you're going after all of that. And there's an underserved region that you could be going after as well that might be just as hot. It might even be hotter. So this will help quite a bit. I would say don't get lost in the weeds with trying to expand ICP. Let it be organic. But if you run into one that comes in that's different than your typical deal, analyze it and see whether or not it's worth experimenting with prospecting into that region. And trust me, if you find the right one and you find a hot lane and you do it right, you can absolutely demolish your target in a positive way for the entire year. So it's absolutely worth keeping an eye out for this type of stuff. So that's this week's episode. If you have any questions or any comments, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment. If you're not, if you're just catching this on Spotify or wherever you can find podcasts, just connect with me on LinkedIn. DM me if there's a particular topic that you want us to cover. I accept all LinkedIn connections. My name's Troy Barter. It's the same on LinkedIn, and we'll catch you next week.